Hello and welcome to Give Yourself Some Leeway, the brand new podcast for high achievers with me, Eugene Lee. Join me as I talk about all things from dealing with work-related stress, burnout, and reinforcing your physical, mental, and emotional well-being for a more sustainable and enjoyable work-life balance. I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and if you do, please hit like and subscribe. So for today's episode, we're going to be covering the importance of habits. What's the difference between a good habit and a bad one? How to create a habit and how to break a bad habit? And how our habits influence not only our lifestyle choices, but also our identity. Now, everyone has their own daily habits, whether that's brushing your teeth when you get up in the morning, grabbing a coffee before going to work, going for a walk at lunchtime, calling a friend or a family member every day, or catching up on Netflix. So when someone suggests that, you should start a habit of that now, it'll be good for you, or you want to break that bad habit now, there, it's doing you no favours, it feels like, I couldn't do that now at all. Like, this is how things have always been. It's like it's hardwired in your brain that this is how things are done. Now, let's take a step back and let's pick any of these habits. Let's just say brushing your teeth. This wasn't a habit that you were born with, unless you were born with a full set of teeth. Or your morning coffee. I hope it's safe to assume that when you were 4 years old, you weren't craving a flat white to kickstart your morning. So while humans are creatures of habit, we tend to change our habits as we grow. I mean, our routines change and our lifestyles change from when we go to school, to college, to when we start working full time. Our routines and our time schedules are shifting dramatically. And so we tend to change our habits and our routines accordingly. Now, we probably don't even think of this or are even conscious of it, but there are 4 stages to how a habit is formed. So the first is a cue. Next is a craving. Then the response, and then reward. So let's say you're heading to work and you pass a cafe and you smell fresh coffee being grinded. The cue is when you smell the coffee. The craving is when you're like, I could kill it for a cup of coffee right now. And your response is, I could easily just grab one here on my way to work. And then the reward is that you'll feel caffeinated. My morning will be off to such a great start. I'll be more focused and more energized. From these 4 stages come the 4 laws to creating a good habit. So the first is cue. Make it obvious. So if you design your environment to make cues of good habits more obvious and visible, you're more likely to see the habit that you want to work on. The next is the craving. Make it attractive. So pair an action that you want to do with something that you need to do. Or you could create a motivation ritual. So let's say you do something you enjoy before you do the difficult habit. 3, response. Make it easy. So reduce the friction to forming the habit. Prime your environment so that it's more easy to carry out the habit. And automate it if possible. If you can do the habit without thinking, you're much more likely to, implement it into your daily routine. And 4, reward. Make it satisfying. So give yourself a reward after completing a difficult habit. Or use a habit tracker, and that way you can stay on track and, go for a continuous daily streak of completing the task. And make it a thing where you don't miss doing your task 2 days in a row. That you stay on top of things, that you stay accountable. So let's just use an example for these 4 stages. Maybe you want to start a habit of going for a walk every evening after work. So the first law is to make it obvious. So design your environment to make cues of good habits obvious and visible. So you could have cues like having your walking shoes at the door when you get home from work. That you're like, okay, just change into my walking shoes and go for a walk. You could have your jacket and the dog lead at the door ready as well. So you're like, okay, I have to take the dog for a walk. You're designing your environment to make it almost impossible not to see that this habit has to be done once you get home from work. And I think that follows through into the second law, which is to make it attractive. You want to pair the action with something, that you want to do or that you need to do. So you want to go for a walk, and what you want to do or need to do is, walk the dog. So you're pairing it with walking the dog, and you're like, okay, I can just go for an extra long walk with the dog. The third law is to make it easy. So when you're starting out, you don't want to be like, okay, I'm going for a 10-mile walk. My first walk every day, I'm going for 10 miles. You want to make it easy where you increase it or improve on it as it gets easier for you. So it might just be, okay, I'm going to walk around the park once today. Or it might be, I might walk for half a mile. And when half a mile feels easy, you might increase it to 1 mile, 2 miles, up to 5 miles, also depending on the weather. And the fourth law is to make it satisfying. So if you go for your walk, you can reward yourself when you get home. You're like, okay, I'm going to make myself a nice hot chocolate when I get home. Or, okay, I did my daily walk, now I can watch an hour of Netflix. And you design it in a way where watching Netflix for the hour after the walk is the reward. If you don't go for your walk that day, you don't watch that hour of Netflix. So I hope that frame makes things easier for you to understand. Next is how to break a habit. So breaking a habit is simply an inversion of how to create a habit. So the first law, instead of making it more obvious, the first law is to make it invisible. So you reduce exposure to cues to perform the habit. The second law is to make it unattractive. So you need to reframe your mindset around the habit and highlight the benefits of avoiding it. The third law, instead of making it easy, you make it difficult to perform the habit. So you increase the friction and how many steps it would take to perform that habit. So it's much less likely that you're going to go into autopilot and carry out that bad habit. And the fourth law is to make it unsatisfying. So for this, you could have an accountability partner who's going to hold you accountable if you fall back on your word and, carry out the bad habit. And you could set up maybe a habit contract that you decide, okay, if I fall back and carry out this bad habit, there's going to be a penalty. Let's say it could be, okay, I'm after falling back in this bad habit, now I'm going to give up a tenner or 20, 50 to a charity that I don't support. And especially if it's something that you don't want to support or give your money to, you're less likely to carry out that bad habit because it's more of a pain point for you. Now let's piece this all together and choose a bad habit. Maybe your bad habit is sitting down and binge watching a whole series on Netflix for 4 hours after work. So the first law is to make it invisible, and you want to reduce your exposure. Maybe you could hide the remote for the TV so you're less likely to turn it on, or Maybe your TV could fit in the cabinet and you can close the doors so you don't see the TV and you don't think about sitting down to watch Netflix. The second law is to make it unattractive. So reframe your mindset around it. What could you be doing that is better than watching Netflix for 4 hours? Maybe you could spend time learning a new hobby. When was the last time you played guitar or played the piano? Maybe you could be spending time with your dog and, going for a walk. You haven't seen him all day, you've been at work. Reframe your mindset that more than 1 hour of Netflix, you feel guilty about it, that you could be spending that time doing something better with your life. And then make it unsatisfying. So you could have an accountability partner who has access to your Netflix account. Maybe they change the password and only give you the new password at the weekends. Or you set up a habit contract with them that they monitor your Netflix activity, and if you've been watching more than an hour, they'd be like, okay, if you watch over an hour, every extra hour you have to donate €50 to a charity you don't like. And the more painful that habit contract, it makes it more unsatisfying to watch that Netflix. It's like, was binging on Netflix for 4 hours worth it? And over time, as you try to break that habit, it becomes so much less satisfying sitting down watching Netflix. Because you're more you're like, have I gone over that hour? And you feel less comfortable. It's the best way to break the habit. Now, when it comes to what's a good habit and what's a bad habit, it depends on the individual. For some, a bad habit might be having peanut butter and Nutella on a bagel for breakfast every morning. If you're trying to lose weight, okay, maybe that's a bad habit. But maybe you're struggling to gain weight. Having a peanut butter and Nutella bagel first thing in the morning might be a good habit to have more calories in your diet. So it's all about personal preference and your own personal development. What you decide what is a good habit and what is a bad habit. Usually bad habits are things that you realize they are holding you back, or they're part of your routine that you don't feel too proud of. I like to think of it as if I was going into an interview and I was to talk about my daily routine, my daily habits, which ones would I not tell the interviewer? Like, you're more likely to say, oh, I go for a half-hour walk every evening with my dog, than you are to say, oh, in the evenings after work, I like to sit down for 4 hours and watch Netflix while scrolling through Instagram. Well, I hope you liked this episode and I hope you found it helpful. And if you did, subscribe to the show, because it makes sure that you don't miss out on new episodes. And it also helps me because it increases the rankings of the show a little bit, which of course makes it a little more easily found by other people who may like it just as much as you. And if you didn't like this episode or anything about the show in general, or if you have any ideas or suggestions or just feedback that you want to share, shoot me an email, eugene@leeway.ie, and let me know what I could do better, or just what your thoughts are on what you'd like to see me do in the future. I read everything myself. I'm always looking for new ideas and constructive feedback. So thanks again for listening to this episode, and I hope to hear from you soon.